Hi, I'm Alex of the History Tellers, and in my notebook this time I found an amazing, daring escape across occupied France by members of the Commandos. Now, if you've ever seen our live show about the Saint-Nazaire raid, you'll know that it's an epic tale of how the Commandos in 1942 stormed a French town that was occupied by the Germans so they could destroy the dry docks which could house the Tirpitz battleship. It's an amazing tale of bravery, ingenuity and winning against all the odds. However, there's lots of side notes to this, little snippets of history that we can't fit into our live shows. The plan for the Saint-Nazaire raid was for the Commandos to arrive by water, both on the large Campbelltown ship, which would later explode, but also on small motor launchers. The idea was these motor launchers would hang around in the water to collect all of those Commandos and take them out again at the end of the raid. Many of the Commandos did escape from Saint-Nazaire on those motorboats, and some were captured or killed in the town. Of those that did escape from the town, just 5 would make it all the way across occupied France and back home to Great Britain. There's a rather dramatic moment in our live show where Abs and I talk about how, well, we could just surrender, but of course the Commandos don't work that way. So no, they're going to fight their way out. And I want to tell you the story of the handful who did manage to fight their way out. In total, 5 Commandos made their way out of Saint-Nazaire, across France and back home to Great Britain. First off, I'll tell you about a group of Commandos who were holed up together, hiding in the cellar underneath a bombed out shop. Now, this group had managed to get themselves into safety, but they realised as the night went on they were cut off and they needed to do something. In this cellar was a Sergeant Major Hines and a Sergeant Challington. There was also Lance Corporal Howarth, Corporal Wright, Corporal Douglas and a Private Harding. These 6 men were trapped underneath this burnt out building with no way of escaping. Many of them were wounded and they had very little in the way of supplies. Overnight they managed to tend to their wounds as best they could, but they realised they needed to split up into pairs, thinking that in small numbers they could probably make their way out of the town and across France without being detected quite so easily. So we'll split it down into the groupings. First off, we've got Sergeant Major Hines and Sergeant Chillington. Now these guys, they needed a bit of help. They were both quite badly wounded, plus they needed to hide their equipment and their clothing. They managed to find some jackets, some civilian jackets, and most importantly for Chillington, some trousers. You see, Chillington was a member of the Queen's Own Cameron Highland Regiment. That meant that he'd gone into Saint-Nazaire wearing his traditional kilt. Now this would have made him rather conspicuous on the run across France, so finding those civilian trousers was an essential part of his escape needs. And so they made their way out of the ruined building and across the town. Now they made it out of Saint-Nazaire, but very soon their wounds were slowing them down, and when they ran into a German patrol, well, they were caught and put into jail. Lance Corporal Howarth and Corporal Wright were meant to make the next pairing, and as they got ready to go out, they were hiding in the cellar as German patrols searched the ruins above them. Now Wright realised that his injury in his leg was severe, and he knew he would slow down Howarth. So as the pair made their way to escape, well, Wright made a decision. He told Howarth to go on without him, and Wright gave himself up to the local Germans so that he would be captured but allow Howarth to escape. Now this meant that Wright's injuries could be tended to. Meanwhile, Howarth was making his way out of the town. In the area surrounding Saint-Nazaire, Howarth was lucky enough to bump into some friendly French locals, and these would help him in his escape. A local French family decided to give Howarth some shelter for a few nights to make sure all the search parties died down. Realising they couldn't help Howarth themselves, the French family found a local teacher who could speak English, but he lived in Saint-Nazaire. He was willing to help, but that meant Howarth had to go straight back into the town. In Saint-Nazaire, however, there was a train station, and so this French teacher helped Howarth get on a train to Bordeaux. Now, Bordeaux itself wasn't safe, but it was close enough to that line between German-occupied France and Vichy France to mean that an escape would be made possible. From Bordeaux, Howarth was able to make his way across land over into Vichy France, and here, well, he hoped that he'd be safe, but unfortunately he was picked up by the police in the area and he was put into jail. After about 8 months in jail, Howarth got out, and I've been unable to find exactly how he managed to get out. Was he freed, or did he escape? It's unclear, but anyway, once out of jail, Howarth was able to make his way straight towards the border with Spain, and this would help him get out of France. From the Spanish border, Howarth could move across Spain relatively unencumbered on his way down to Gibraltar, which was held by the British. Here he could get a boat or an aircraft back to home to England, and so Howarth was able to make that escape from Saint-Nazaire all the way back home. The last two that escaped from that cellar beneath the burning shop was a Corporal Douglas and a Private Harding. These guys perhaps did the most brazen escape from Saint-Nazaire of the lot. Realising that their insignia and their uniforms would give them away, well, they sort of rolled up their trousers, covered up the badges on their coats, and walked out of the town. They made it out and into the marshy areas that surrounded Saint-Nazaire, where they could disappear into the night. Only travelling at night to avoid detection, the pair of them made their way across the countryside until they met an American woman who lived with her French husband in the local area. This couple would give them food, clothes, equipment, and importantly bicycles, which would help them travel faster as they moved across the country. Now, using their bicycles, which improved their speed, they were able to make their way to the town of Locks, where they would meet a French lawyer who would help them with the next stage of their escape. Along with more food and clothing and the things needed to keep them alive, this French lawyer was able to find for them fake papers that meant that they could escape detection even if stopped by the German patrols. So Douglas and Harding were able to catch a train to Marseille, and here they were able to get put upon the Pat line. Now, the Pat O'Leary line was an organisation of underground agents who helped Allied servicemen who had got stranded in France. They were specialists of getting them out of the country and back home to Great Britain, and this is exactly what happened. Both Corporal Douglas and Private Harding were able to return home to Great Britain and safety. In total, 3 of the 6 who were in that broken down cellar had made their way back to Great Britain. There was also a second group of soldiers. Corporals Wheeler and Sims had got separated during the night's fighting and had taken refuge in a ditch somewhere in the town of Saint-Nazaire. As the fighting died down and they decided to see what was going on, they realised that their safe hiding place wasn't that safe at all. They had taken refuge right next to the Commandanteur, or the Commander's office. This was the man in charge of the defence of Saint-Nazaire, and they were in a small ditch just outside this building. Somehow they made it through till the morning, and they decided they needed to get out of the town and out of France. Now, they were a bit lost and they had no way of finding out where to go. They didn't really have a map suitable for escape across France, and so they headed out of the town as best they could. And they ended up going sort of northwest from the town and ended up in a small farming community. This small town of the Immaculate Conception was a rural community, and when the 2 soldiers arrived there, they burrowed their way into a large haystack where they found a cavity in the middle. The following day, the local farmer found them hiding in his haystack, but rather than turn them over to the Germans, they decided to help them. The Frenchman and his father took them back to the farmhouse, where they decided to exchange the soldiers' uniforms, guns and equipment for civilian clothes, food and money. A very good deal for the soldiers. They also were able to put them on the right path that would take them away from Saint-Nazaire. Now, the area around Saint-Nazaire at that time was quite marshy, and you needed to know the routes to safely get out. Travelling by night on the paths and the back roads that had been shown to them, Wheeler and Sims were able to make their way further and further from Saint-Nazaire, often relying on the help of more loyal French people as they came across them in the night. Slowly, the pair moved their way towards the border with Vichy France, where they thought they would be safe. Now, this is no small feat. Saint-Nazaire was a good 150-160 miles from the nearest border, and so it was a long journey to make at night, whilst potentially being hunted and with enemy eyes all around. Eventually they did make it all the way to the border, but then a new problem arose. Wheeler and Sims found that the border was quite well guarded, and they had to somehow get over into Vichy France before they could consider themselves even vaguely safe. Luckily, they found some locals who could help. A pair of local French girls volunteered to distract the guards as the Commandos snuck behind and across the border into safety. Now in Vichy France they hit upon a bit of luck. They met up with a Belgian man who was also trying to escape from German-occupied France. The three of them teamed up and they worked together to ride the buses all the way to Toulouse. In Toulouse they were able to get in touch with the local SOE networks, who were able to spirit them away from France and into safety. In the end, it was just these 5 soldiers who were able to escape from Saint-Nazaire and return home to England. Now, some of them were returning back months after the raid had happened, and presumably they had been listed as missing and even dead. It must have been a bit of a shock for them to reappear back in their units, but all of them did return to the Commandos and continued to fight throughout the Second World War. There are many brilliant stories about the Commandos, and this was just a tiny snippet of one story. It fills up the notebook quite quickly when you start researching into all of the little extras that go on around an event. And the Saint-Nazaire raid has been called the greatest raid for good reason. But for now, I hope you've enjoyed the tale from the notebook, and please do subscribe to the YouTube channel, find the History Tellers on Facebook and Twitter, and come back for more Tales from a Notebook another time.